What is up, everybody? It is Sean here, back with another video, and today we're going to be talking about the O9 meta, and I have a special guest with me, Straw Hat Pecan,
Pecan, which
Pecan.
debatable topic, but I go by Pecan.
But yeah, I have a good friend here with me who's going to help me talk about the O9.
We have this graphic here before us, and I don't think it's surprising anyone what we see at the top. Of course, I just want to highlight real quick. This is from Reddit off the Asian Yen Bear. So I think they do a lot of meta like breakdowns in the East with tournaments and such. And I mean, honestly, we got what we kind of all expected at the top, rounding off the final meta. Blue Doflamingo showing up as the most popular deck. What are your thoughts on Blue Dofi?
I mean, I think the deck is fantastic. I mean, it's very consistent. There's a lot of different ways that you can play it. I know when it first came out, a lot of people were like, should you run the Jozus? Should you run the Teaches? And now we're kind of getting more into like the final lists. We've seen a lot of different lists, like Jackson Huang. He was running the 7-cost Doflamingo from the starter decks.
Yeah.
And that was kind of questionable to a lot of people. And a lot of different tech choices. So I think the deck is, again, I think the deck is just super consistent. It's super strong. Obviously it struggles into a Nell. Bonnie's a 50-50. So, but overall its matchup spread is pretty good.
Those Jozus. I think you need those Jozus for the Bonnie matchup. It just really, it makes them struggle. But I mean, honestly, like seeing this graph, I think for me, it gives me a lot of hope for the game. I know OP09 is an anniversary set, so it's already going to be huge in that regard. But for people that are looking for a different change of pace for the meta, I think it's going to do a lot for that. Obviously, I think for us here in the West, we're going to probably see a lot more Blackbeard than we saw in the East, personally, in my opinion. I think we have a lot of, favoritism for like black and just removal in that regard. We saw in OP08, we had a lot of Lucci. ST14 Luffy came out a little bit, and then of course Black Yellow Luffy. And with that, that's the focus on the 8-drop Gecko Moria and just how strong that card is and how much that breaks certain decks. I'll say those 3 decks, though, I mentioned did use it fairly differently, but I don't know. What do you think about the deck breakdown for like top 5 here? We got Blue Dofi, Purple Luffy, Lucci still hanging around, Shanks, and then of course Black Yellow Luffy. Bonnie hanging behind, and then Teach. Pretty close for some of these, but
yeah, no, for sure. I'm so sick of Black Yellow Luffy. This is just this is just my little rant. I'm so sick.
I think a lot of people are. But
yeah, my thing is I don't like decks where there's no interaction. So I don't like playing against Black Yellow Luffy. I don't like playing against Nami. It's just not fun. It's not fun to me. I like interaction between 2 different decks, and that's why I like card games. That's why I think it's fun to play, to see different play styles. But yeah, I think Black Yellow Luffy is sadly just gonna, I guess it may stick around. I think Bonnie's pretty good in this format. I know that me and you both played Bonnie in the 07 format, so we have
I think we're definitely going to see like a little bit different shape up for us for like top 5 decks here in the West, especially the fact that we see everything after it's already kind of hashed out and solved, so to speak. But I do think with a lot of these lists at top, like we see a lot of variety in terms of the lists that are like running. Like some decks, like definitely Black Yellow Luffy, it's pretty much solved whenever like the meta around it is kind of solved, right? There's not a lot of variance with some of those decks. It depends on like the removal, but Bonnie, I've been seeing a lot of different lists. Purple Luffy, relatively the same, but Dofi, like you said earlier, has a lot of variance. Definitely Shanks, I've seen a bunch of different lists running around the same things, but like a lot of variance here and there with some of the tech choices. But yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more interaction by just the metric of how much variety we're getting, as opposed to just different black decks using Gecko Moria. We're actually seeing different colors interact in different ways, so I'm definitely excited about that. So if you're somebody who's thinking about getting back into the game after the 08 kind of slowing down, I think this is probably gonna be one of the best sets to get back into the game. And honestly, I'm excited. I don't know. What about you?
No, I think it's going to be fantastic. I'm really excited for Shanks. I think Shanks is going to be fun. It's a different style of red. You know, it's not just it's aggro, but it's like control aggro.
Yeah, there's a lot of control.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, we definitely do like red here in the West.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew like the the older red bands and how prevalent Zoro and then Red Green Law was back in the day, and of course Whitebeard just being a monster. So I think there's gonna be like a bit of just maybe not nostalgia or like favoritism, but like people like Shanks, people like red in general. So I think as much as I personally think Blackbeard's going to be meta changing, I think still people will be running these different decks, but getting into it, what are your thoughts on some of the new leaders? Like, do you think Blackbeard is going to shape up our meta in the West?
I will say almost every new black deck I feel like we get just is almost always good. Like it's almost, I mean, black, like starter deck 14 Luffy, well, and the other black Luffy wasn't great. The one that
ST14, it took a while to solve. It took a while to like get running. Not solve, but get running.
Well, I'm talking about like the original.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm
I don't
about?
even think. Yeah, the plus 1,000 or so one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, that deck didn't go anywhere.
No, definitely. These decks have come a long way, but I don't know, just by the fact of Blackbeard turning off on plays, and of course the dreaded 10 cost being just a monster, it makes decks play a lot differently, and decks that can't adjust as much are definitely going to be hit. I don't think that Blackbeard might be definitely best deck in format, debatably, or at least like one of the top 3. If he's not, though, he's still impacting the meta in a very heavy way with how much he forces you to play differently. Decks like Blue Doflamingo obviously just go super aggro, super wide, and kind of rush things like that down. But I don't know. I'm wondering how much we'll see Blackbeard change up our meta here, just because of how much we prefer like those types of control and removal decks, right? Is there anything that you're like gonna miss out on playing because of the on plays missing, and any decks that you were like gonna be missing? Because I know I play Vivi a lot as like a for fun deck, and that alone runs Rayleigh, and that on play is just gone. Half my cards just on plays are just gone.
Right.
So I don't know. Anything you're gonna be dreading trying to play against Blackbeard?
I mean, I'm a Dofi player right now, so I think Dofi's still gonna be, for the most part, pretty relevant. It looks like.
Seeming like he's probably gonna be best deck. Again, I think it comes down to like the region and like play style preferences. I think Blue Dofi is gonna be a solid pick and probably top deck, but personally, I've heard a lot of people gearing up for Blackbeard. I've seen a lot of people talking about him. Not saying he's going to be best deck, but but he's going to be a threat.
No. It's a little concerning. I mean, Enel and Nami are pretty much going to be like, they're pretty, I don't know if I'm going to say they're not going to be playable, but they're going to get hit pretty hard by it. It's going to be a pretty tough matchup.
How far down is Enel on this list? Honestly, I'm not too upset. I'll say I'm such a biased against Enel player. There's been so many times where I've just like had the swings, had the math out, and it's just been, a 0 cost out of life or something like that. That's
a base trigger.
Yeah. I don't know. There are certain decks like that. Yeah, I do feel bad for the Nami players, of course, but even so, we still did see some Nami being played, at like, no matter what's top deck, best deck in format, you're still able to sneak wins. You're still able to play those decks. It just matters of, can you dodge these decks, I guess? Can you sneak around them? Because I think, honestly, with how much Blackbeard is kind of controlling other control decks, in my opinion, like it makes Lucci play differently. It makes Black Yellow Luffy play a little bit differently. Also, Red Shanks and the dreaded 10 cost Rush Roger making Black Yellow play a bit differently. It kind of gives more of a way for these aggro decks to come about. And I think, personally, I enjoy the aggro meta a lot better. than just the control, like Rob Lucci running the scene, or like Black Yellow Luffy being a menace, right? You know, so there's stuff that can keep that stuff in check. That I think that's good for the game, right?
No, I agree. I definitely agree with you there.
Let's see. I was just trying to check. I mean, I feel bad for Calgara. I feel like he should be a higher represented deck. You know, he's that yellow aggression that I kind of like. But
right,
honestly, yeah, I mean, Nami still had like 120-ish like weighted total for the showings. Not like a completely destroyed deck. You know, I think a good Nami player can still manage to go against Blackbeard, but I think there is more of a checks and balance system right now. You know, getting into the talk of it though, do you think we're going to see a ban list going into 09? Because for the past few sets, right, we've seen them pop up almost immediately in the beginning of these new sets, and especially with you know, the championships happening in January, I believe, people would have to have time to adjust their decks and their playstyle for any like characters or leaders getting banned. Do you think we're going to see anything like that? Any ban lists?
Oh, it's tough, man. It really is. Like, you know, with Bandai, like I remember last year I did a podcast talking about the bans, like their very first bans. I think it was like the One Cost Searcher Nami and was some other stuff. Do you remember those bans? Like the red bans?
Yeah. The Nami, like the Dan, I think.
Yeah, Nami to Dan.
Yeah.
And yeah, because they were really trying to hit Whitebeard. Oh yeah, and the Whitebeard leader was just banned. So
I was playing VV back then because I think it was that was set 4, and that was like when I first got in the game, and I just like built a VV deck on my own, and I was like, dude, this hits me so hard. I'm like, what did I do? I've not won a locals. Yeah, but definitely that ban list. Yeah.
Yeah, and like everybody was expecting like yellow to get hit, like the 10 cost big moms.
Yeah.
So and now people are like, are they gonna hit the Morias? And it's like, if they restrict it. Or if they, I think maybe not restricting the Morias, I think maybe would be smarter to maybe like restrict like the Ice Ages or something like that. Something that's not, because if we get rid of Moria, I feel like those decks, some decks are just gonna be dead. Like
yeah, definitely Black Yellow Luffy would have to have something that comes in to replace it, like a new card. But with like O10 all fully revealed, obviously there's nothing immediately down the line to replace it.
Right.
So I don't think. Honestly, I don't think that, you know, looking at this showing, right, we have the finals meta breakdown stats for 09. I don't think that there's, if you told me in set 8 that like, yeah, they're banning Gecko Moria, the 8 drop, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Or they're restricting it, or like, I don't know if you've seen Union Arena and how they do their bans, but they recently did one where if you have this card in your deck, you can't have this other card in the deck. So for One Piece sake, it'd be like, if you have the 8-drop Gecko Moria, you can't have the 4-drop Rebecca Blocker in your deck. Something like that. That would make sense. But right now, as we're seeing the stats for 09, I don't foresee a world where we need a ban list. You know, I know that's, you know, people are going to be saying like, oh, the Gecko Moria is still too strong. I've even had people say that like the 4-drop blue Jinbei is too strong. And yeah, if they were going to hit anything in blue, it'd probably be that for the Dofi matchup. But still, I don't know. Like, looking at this deck, do you think we need to hit any card particularly?
I don't know. I mean, the Dofi matchup, it's like, it's tough because there are like, Dofi doesn't have a top end. So it's like, there are plenty of ways to play around it. Like that's the deck's biggest weakness is if you can't kill your opponent in a certain amount of time, you're on a timer essentially.
Yeah. It's basically as the opponent to the Dofi player, you have to stabilize the matchup and you have to kind of make sure you don't die before you can outpace them in the late game. I know some Dofi players have been putting in like the 1 of 10 drop draw 4 Kaido, something like that to give them a bit of top end, and refilling that hand is just crazy. But
I personally run it in my deck. I think it's really good. I think it's a solid card, especially against like a Nell, Bonnie, like, you know, stuff that runs a lot of top end.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm looking at the top 5, you know, the blue Dofi, purple Luffy, Lucci, like Shanks and Black Yellow. That's a pretty diverse like for a meta, like top of the meta. I think that's what we normally see in terms of like at least color spread or anything like that, you know, like a rock paper scissors type of checks and balances, right? Like we got purple, we got blue, we got red, we got black. Like that's That's pretty diverse for a meta. I know people are looking at that, and there's still a lot of 8-drop Gecko Moria being run in those decks, right? But I think with how much Teach is present there, like that kind of lowers it a bit. Like if Blackbeard wasn't a leader in this set, I think we still definitely see a lot more Black Yellow Luffy up at the top. I think we see more Rob Lucci up the top. But even some of the decks that are a little bit lower, right? Like Nami, Red Purple Luffy, right? Like Purple Black Enel, stuff like this that are just like still a problem for some of these decks. You know, I don't think we have a situation where, if you remember Sakazuki, how just it was either you play Sakazuki or you just don't win, right? I think with some of these matchups at the top, there's definitely give and take with themselves, but also like looking down, like decks like 5 to 15 in this, they have a chance to beat some of these top decks, in my opinion, right?
Yeah. No, I think we've come a long way just as a game. I think the meta's come a long way, and we're getting to a point where it's like almost completely healthy. I mean, there's obviously, you know, there's still some things that maybe could get tweaked, but like looking back, like what you were talking about with like Newgate and like Sakazuki especially, I think was pretty rough, the 05 format. But I think we've come a long way. I think, you know, a lot's changed. PRB and the starter decks. It's just a really good time to get into this game, like overall.
Yeah. I like, especially as an anniversary set, huge set, a lot of chase cards if you're more of a collector. But just in terms of meta, I think things are like, if you want to play a particular deck, you know, you're not going to come to locals and only show up against one deck. You know, of course that depends on your locals, but you know, I'm interested to see what our first like regionals look like, but I'm gonna say right now, I think there's gonna be the most diverse format we see, and I personally don't think we're gonna see a ban list. If we do, I think it might be down the line after championships and like Nats, right? I think once that goes, then we would, because I think they would probably wait to see how our meta kind of defines itself. But like if it turns out people are particularly only on one deck, even with how much diversity we see with like the top 5, maybe we'd see something after champs, but like in Nats. But I don't know. I personally don't think, even though it's crazy, because again, you asked me back in set 8, I'd be like, yeah, get Gecko Mori out of there. I don't know. Just what he does for so many decks, like either Rob Lucci developing an entire board and popping something, or, you know, as you stated, Black Yellow Luffy just being a monster with that.
It's just that stupid Rebecca Spandeem Lucci combo. That just drives. That's ridiculous. That's the only thing.
There's too much Don value in one play. Like that is crazy. If you're unfamiliar with it, what is it? It's you play out the Rebecca off the 8-drop, which the Rebecca can play out the Spandine, which is a 3-cost. And then in turn, that Spandine can play out the Rob Lucci 4-drop that KOs 2 things, right? Like, correct. That is a lot of value. So
it's a ton of value.
Yeah. Typically with the 8-drop, you're only playing out a 4-cost and a 2-cost. And if that 4-cost is a Rebecca, then of course you can play out a 3-cost. But that Spandine just pumps it up a little bit more, bringing out the Rob Lucci. Like, I remember people complaining about the Hina Lucci Rebecca combo in set 5 with Sakazuki. I don't think it holds a candle to that combo.
Right? No, I agree. Also, even if you have a Brook out and then you play like Helmeppo and then Ice Age something. Oh, yeah. There's just so many different ways.
Nothing safe. So what are like your thoughts going into set 9? What are you going to be looking to play? And if you got any advice for like a new player looking to pick up a deck out of this list, what are you suggesting?
As far as like what I'm going to play, I'm probably going to stick with Dofi just because that's the deck that I've just devoted the most time to. I really enjoy it. It's, again, I've said this in my previous videos, it's a deck that I've wanted to play since set 1, but now it's way more consistent. It's way cheaper because of the starter decks and everything. And, you know, I want to play Shanks too. Shanks looks like a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm, again, nostalgic for Red because I started in 02. Yeah. I might have to build Blackbeard because honestly, I know it's not going to run any of the Navy stuff, but I might just run it just to run it and just play it. I probably won't make it my main deck just because I feel like, you know, the start of 09, we're going to see quite a bit of Blackbeards, and I
Yeah.
personally am not a fan of mirror matches, even though I play a ton of Dofi mirror matches. So.
As much as people complain about Bonnie and how long the matches take, the mirror match with Bonnie, and like we can, because we played each other with Bonnie, right? They go super fast, especially if you just see Hody. It becomes like, oh, who sees more Hodys? But like the fact that you're taking the life with Hody, like they I don't know. Normally when I'm mirror matching a Bonnie player, we're over like before other people's matches, especially at like locals. I don't know. But I agree. Mirror matches, especially depending on what it was. Like I honestly wonder if Blue Dopey is going to fall off in popularity, because I'm already hearing people complain about the mirror matches. Maybe you can attest to this as somebody who's played it. I really haven't given much testing and play to Dopey myself. I played a little bit like on the sim back a few months ago, but how are the mirror matches there? Because I've heard they're very slow.
They can be. I think you're right. People the hype for that deck specifically is kind of starting to fall off a bit, because I've had people come up to me at my locals and be like, I'm not playing this deck, I don't want to do mirror matches. And just in general, I think people are they're really just holding out for 09. They want to build Blackbeard, they want to play Black Purple Luffy, they want to play Shanks, they want to play Nico Robin, like they want to play all these leaders. So they're just like, okay, I'm not going to devote any time to the starter decks. They're hopping on the sim, they're getting ready for those decks. But as far as the mirror goes, it really just depends. You know, I'm a confident Dofi player, but there's definitely people at my locals that are better than me. Like they practice like with some of the top players, and they coach me and they talk to me about it, and I appreciate it. Like my scene's pretty good. You know, there's definitely some sweat, but I think it really is just board control, who can keep their board and keep it standing, and then you know, hand size is also a big portion to it. So I'd say it's like kind of mid to can be long. I think it is probably a little bit longer than the Bonnie match, if we're being honest. I think so.
Personally, I've heard talks like on just how, and yeah, I agree on like that's your goal, like controlling the board, but also with how many tools of like bouncing things, getting a few cards back from trash with the 4-drop Gecko Moria, right? It can get pretty long. So I think honestly, from a local standpoint, if you're looking for a deck, it might not even be the Blue Doflamingo, just because of how long some of those mirror matches can be. And I think with that, I believe we'll still probably see Blue Dofi popping up in any big tournament, right? When people are taking it seriously, where there's money from the prize cards on the line. Of course, people are going to try and play best deck and format, even if it's a slog to get through. But for like the local scene, and maybe even like a store regional, you know, we might see some of these other decks popping up. I think Purple Luffy definitely going to be a highly coveted pick for a lot of it, which is how aggressive it can be. Even if you're not getting your on plays from Blackbeard, you're still pumping out pretty high cost and high powered bodies, you know, so you have a good chance in that matchup. You know, against Shanks, you have, of course, some defensive cards, like, you know, a lot of good blockers, everything. I think Luffy might be honestly one of the more popular decks we see at like the local scene, right? At least until we get like a big tournament, because I think at a tournament we'll still probably see a very similar list to this at least. I don't know. I think locals, it could be really anything, because I know a lot of people who are really excited for Robin. I know some people who actually want to build Buggy, like who are just really excited to play Buggy. Shout out to my Buggy players. I think he gets a lot of, he's not a like start of 09 type of leader, right? He relies on a few promo cards that they got throughout the set, like the new 7-drop that just can attack but prevents 3 and 4 cost characters, I believe, from attacking, something like that. It really helps the deck just fulfill that 10 costs requirement, and also kind of slows down the match for that, right? So I think as we get into the meta a little bit, like definitely decks like that will pop up more. But yeah, I think off the bat, like you said, we'll see a lot of Blackbeard, a lot of Blue Dofi. Of course, Luffy's kind of just looking for a couple of pieces like that Gum Gum Stamp, the event that is kind of crucial for a lot of these purple Straw Hat decks in set 9.
For sure.
But
what do you plan on running? What's your go-to?
Definitely going to be building Robin, as you know, I was very excited to see another Straw Hat enter the scene, right? Robin's one of my favorite characters. Definitely going to be updating my Bonnie deck if I need to update anything. I don't really know if it runs too much new stuff. But I'm gonna say underrated pick that might be a good thing to build now to invest for later. Lim is getting so much support. Controversial statement. I think Lim is getting so much support that it's going to be a situation similar to Vegapunk. If you remember in set 7, Vegapunk wasn't played at all. Set 8 recently for us, he snuck out, I think, like a regional win, right? Like, yeah, he won a pretty big tournament.
It was a Treasure Cup or regional.
Treasure Cup or regional, but some big tournament, at least like in person, you know? So if you're looking for a fun deck, not meta contending, obviously right now, or maybe even in the future, but if you looked at some of the set 10 cards, there's so much green Odyssey. It's kind of insane. You have a lot of choices. I think it's a similar Vegapunk situation where you just have so much support now to choose from that Lim's going to be down the line like something people pick up on. But
I hope you're right, brother.
I think
I love green.
So. Yeah, right. But yeah, definitely going to be looking for Bonnie. I think Shank's going to be a pick for me. Purple Luffy was a lot of fun. I managed to play in a starter deck tournament back when the the STs came out. I played Purple Luffy. That deck is just so much fun. I think it'll do super well into the meta. Super aggressive. But yeah, I gotta say overall, like, what are your thoughts looking at this list? Are you excited for the meta, or
Yeah, no, I'm very excited. I just think it's interesting. Again, going back to like the 05 format, it was so different because here it seemed like we were like yellow heavy, and then in Japan it was like all black. So I'm curious if we've come this far to where maybe we'll match the same as the East. Maybe it's going to be Blackbeard both, or is it going to be different? Is it going to be Purple Luffy at the top or something else? It's just interesting, when you have a card game that the meta is reflected in different parts of the world. So
yeah. We also have to think about like time frame, right? Like, we're getting this right before our Nats, and has it confirmed? Is Nats going to be OP09 format, or is it going to be like 8.5?
I believe it is 09. You talking about the one in Florida?
Yeah. I think January, right? So that's going to be interesting. We'll only have, a month or two, right, of time for anyone going to Nats to test out some of this stuff, to like play it in person, to kind of develop it. So I don't know if that will affect how different we'll be, because maybe more people will just gravitate towards what 09 was looking like in the East, to kind of like, okay, maybe this was solved, right, to pick up on it. But I think that might impact how our initial meta breakdown goes. But overall, I'm excited for it. Yeah. I mean,
what are your thoughts? Do you think that it's going to be the same? Like, do you think it's going to be just kind of like the same as the East, or do you think there's going to be a little bit more variety here and on our side? Like, what's your prediction?
I think we always dip a little bit differently, right? We always change up a bit. But looking at OP09 specifically, like, I think it's going to be a lot of the same. I think people are... I mean, let's go back to set 8 for a second, right? What were your thoughts on the meta? Like, it was a lot of Lucci, a lot of black yellow. Like, how did that make you feel as a player, right? Like, going into stuff like that.
Yeah, it was a little stale.
It was stale. It was stale. And I think, just as a general sense, even top players, even people that like at my locals that are like sweaty in that regard, trying to play the best deck and stuff, I think they want to check out different decks. They want to check out different play styles and stuff like that. So I think it might just be a bunch of variety at the start for like your general players. People that are going to Nats and everything might gravitate towards like the Blue Dofi, the Blackbeard, right? I think that might be like best picks. But I think there's going to be a lot of variety. But speaking of best picks, do you think that we're going to see Blue Dofi as best deck in format? Or is like, what is your pick for best deck?
I mean, I'll say that it's tough. I think that it is still the contender to be one of the best decks. Just again, I think the matchup spread for it is just really good. Like, there's a couple of bad matchups, but we're gonna start seeing less Enel, so that's gonna be good for the deck. The deck's gonna benefit from that as well. But I mean, the Blackbeard match is probably I assume it's probably gonna be rough. I don't know how it is into Shanks, and I'm not too sure how it'll be into Robin, but I think overall it's still gonna be like a menace. I think
Yeah.
it's still gonna be prevalent. So I'll say I'll put my prediction as like top tier deck. Maybe not the best because I think it's between that or Blackbeard. I think are gonna be
agree.
like the top
I agree.
two.
I think honestly for the West and how we play, I think a lot of the top players are going to gravitate towards Blackbeard for how it plays, how it controls, and how it can play into other top decks. I think we're going to see, yeah, it's going to be a fight between Blackbeard and Blue Dofi for what controls the meta. Not necessarily against each other, because I don't really know how that matchup is going to go. Honestly, I would think that it's a lot of Blue Dofi favored for how aggressive you can be, but for how much they are impacting the meta as a whole in terms of like influence, I think Blackbeard and Blue Dofi are definitely up there, as you can see with the graph, how much Blue Dofi was favored. You know, I think that will translate over here.
Yeah,
for sure.
No, for sure. But yeah, it'll be interesting. Trying to think what else. I guess Katakuri, we haven't talked about Katakuri at all. It looks like it's kind of
he's still hanging around, right? Yeah, it's like one of those decks that it's pretty straightforward, right? It's gotten some more support with, I think some of them have run a little bit of the egghead stuff, but for the most part, I feel like we've seen a lot of the same lists since like set 6, maybe 7. You know, it's pretty solved. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of decks that are hanging around for sure. Any of them on here that like speaking to you? You know, I talked about Lim. Do you have any picks for decks that might not be the top of the meta, but you're interested to see going into 09?
You know, like green yellow Yamato, I'm gonna be honest, like I kind of have a soft spot for it. It's just a fun deck. Now,
yeah,
you know, obviously it struggles into a lot, but it's just fun, man. It's just a fun deck.
I think that's the best problem we can have for the card game, right? Like, there's a lot of fun decks. Yeah, they might struggle, but there's a lot of things to pick from now, you know? As we power creep and get into these later sets, there's a lot of good things to pick from, you know? I think that's... sorry.
Oh, sorry. I know that you've made a ton of like Yamato. You've made a couple of Yamato lists yourself. And, you know, there's so many different ways to build it. I think like that and a couple other decks I think are really cool. Like to gravitate towards decks like that where they don't have like a specific identity. They're just like, you know, it's like kind of open source. You can kind of build it. There are different ways you can build it. There are limitations to building it. But, you know, you can build it in a certain way that's completely different from anything else. And there's no like clear identity. Now, obviously, there are cards that you need to use for it, but yeah.
Yeah, and kind of like going back to the reason why going off that into why I don't think there's going to be a ban list personally, as much as there might be people screaming about certain cards, right? Looking back at, again, Sakazuki, there was some variance. I think like the biggest key factor was like, do you run the 10 drop blue Kaido to draw 4? I think that ended up being like one of the deciding factors for like the win back in like set 6's Nats and like Worlds and stuff. But it was relatively like a solved deck in the way that 90% of the pieces are the same as one or the other. Here, like, I think there's so much variety in even some of these top decks that nothing is dominating. Yeah, I do see the green, that 1000 weight for Blue Dofi, but like there's so much stuff that can at least compete against Blue Dofi to an extent and other decks on the list that like it almost doesn't feel like Blue Dofi is dominating the same way that Sakazuki was back in the day. Like, what are your thoughts on how much a deck stands out? Like, is Blue Dofi on that level at all, or like is it a different feeling, right? Like, yeah.
No, I don't think it's at all in the same level. Kind of like, you know, like red purple law, like just totally gate kept some stuff like Reiju, you couldn't play Reiju with red purple law around.
Even black yellow Luffy, like that was kind of a bit harder of a matchup with Law just bottom decking your Sabos.
Right, exactly.
You know?
So it gets to a point where it's like, okay, this deck is really strong, but is it strong like in an unhealthy way to where if, like you go up to it, it's just an auto lose? That's really where you get to the point where you're asking like yourself that, really.
I know I talked about like Blackbeard kind of gatekeeping some decks that can't adjust as much, but it still I don't think there's a deck on here that's so much gatekeepy to the other decks on here that we have a meta situation like that, which will result in probably no ban list. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah,
I think kind of like how we were talking about earlier, I don't think that there really is a reason. And even if there was, they probably wouldn't do it until probably after the big tournament, because it's like, okay, we saw a ton of this. They look at the data from like all the tournament results and everything. It's like, maybe there's a little bit too much of this. Maybe we should do something to get rid of it.
I think for anyone that is like in favor of a ban list, you have to look at what was happening in the East in the 08 meta. Every top table was like majority red purple law. Everything. Like it was basically like you bring red purple law to the table or you don't really have a great chance with just how much broken stuff it got in set 8, right? And it doesn't appear to be like that as much as Blue Dofi is kind of in the lead, at least in this chart, right? There is a lot of variance, you know. I think as long as they see some different stuff come to the table, they're probably not gonna mess with things in terms of banning stuff. Now, do I still think that 8-drop Gecko Moria is really strong? Yes. But at the same time, we don't have, like you said, we don't have an alternative right now. So if you shut off 8-drop, some of these decks just go completely away. And I don't think that's as healthy for the game as people that want it to go away want, right?
Right. Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, the perfect way to kind of close out this discussion is basically just like, we don't think that there's necessarily going to be a ban list. Looking forward, it looks like the meta is looking to be in a pretty good spot from a diverse standpoint. And there's a lot of good reasons why now is to get into the card game. Because again, PRB, a lot of decks, a lot of cards are way cheaper, are more available.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember in 05 how much a Sakazuki deck was? Even a purple Luffy or an Enel deck?
Yeah.
Everything was 300 plus, I feel like. It was like 300-400 bucks for just like regular art stuff. It was crazy.
Yeah. It was insane. It was, I mean, again, 05 was a fun set, but yeah, it's crazy to think that we've come that far.
Yeah. So yeah, any closing thoughts on like the meta stuff you're looking forward to, stuff you're not gonna miss from set 8?
I'm curious. I don't know. Like, I guess Lucci's really strong, and it's one of those matchups that I don't really necessarily look forward going into whenever I have to play against it or anything. But I will say it is winnable. It's not like an auto loss or anything like that. I think it's a winnable matchup, and I think Lucci is still going to be powerful going into this next set, but I think we're going to see a little bit less of it because Blackbeard being the new toy, everybody's going to want to play with that, especially a lot of people who play Lucci are going to probably stick with Blackbeard, especially if they're new, because it's like, well, black's the color that I'm the most comfortable with, so I'm just going to move to the next leader, especially if it's aiming to be really strong. So I think overall it's going to be a great set. Like, I'm also looking forward to Nico Robin. I'm also looking forward to Shanks. Who knows? Maybe I'll build a buggy deck just to try it out. So
I think the biggest thing to take away from all of this is right now the game is at a very healthy state. Going into 09, I should say. 08, probably a different story. I don't think it was the healthiest game to play. I think it was overall not the most fun, but 09 seems very healthy. There is a lot of stuff to choose from on both the casual side for like fun decks. I talked about Lim. I think Robin can both be pretty strong and pretty casual at the same time. There's a lot of good casual decks, and there's a lot of good meta decks that fit a variety of play styles. So overall, probably not going to see a ban list. I personally would be pretty surprised if we did, especially like if they dropped it in the beginning like we saw back in set 7 and 8 with Law being gone and all that stuff, like pretty soon in the set. I think that would catch me by surprise, but overall looking like a great set.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you guys are debating on jumping in this set, or you've been eyeing the card game for a while, eyeing certain stuff, now is definitely a good time to do it, especially with PRB coming out. But anyway, I think that pretty much covers. We just wanted to kind of yap about the O9 format.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, man, for being here. I appreciate
thank
you.
Thank you.
I had some great stuff to say. And yeah, I will put a link into his channel in the description. Go check out his stuff. His videos are really spot on. Great talks, great deck techs. But anyway, guys, thank you all for watching. Again, let me know in the comments below what you guys think, if there will be a ban list, or if you don't think there's going to be a ban list, and what you're going to be playing in the O9 format. Got more content on the way as always, but as always, guys, I will see you later. Peace.